Okay, sorry about that, guys. Great to be on the tube here with you guys. I know many of you, and many of you have helped at the Arena National Championships over the years, and I appreciate that help so much. Here's an interesting thing, and I don't know if you watched the USA Curling, the assembly YouTube videos, those informational videos that came on from the webinar on the USA Curling assembly in October, and the one on the Mayflower Curling Club where they had that construction video with Saeed Hakim from ISS Solar that installed the new floor in the Mayfield Club. Very interesting. You should, if you haven't watched that, you should watch that. Both as a ice maker, an ice tech, as a curling club president or whatever, you may someday have to deal with some of these things. If you build a dedicated club, boy, there's some great information on that. And what he said an interesting thing, and I really, really appreciated this. And I know Sean Olson, he's listening, he would agree with me on this. Saeed said, you know, we're in the business of installing the equipment so that you guys can make ice. We don't tell you how to make the ice. We put in the equipment. We say the equipment's going to work. We know it's going to work, but we don't tell you how to make the ice. And the other thing we don't do is we don't tell Zamboni drivers how to drive. And what that told me is we got to learn most of the time when we're studying and we're learning all this stuff about curling ice, that there are times when we have to stay in our lane. And I don't want to say that you don't pick up information from all around and that you get out and you learn and everything, but we got to stay focused on the very kind of the essential things that help us to get better curling ice in an arena. We can't, like, I want to say this, we can't get off so far that thinking that we can have perfect dedicated club ice in an arena is possible. You really, I want to say it this way, you really, really can't. If you had the ability to flood every week in an arena, perhaps you could have curling ice the quality, arena curling ice the quality of some dedicated clubs. So we got to work with what we have. We have to stay in our lane, understanding that there's only so much that we can do. Now that's kind of like a disclaimer. That's a disclaimer. So if I'm going to say something here, it's probably going to be things that I have learned that might not work for your arena. But it's great knowledge to have, and I've learned from a lot of these folks on this call here. So the first point that we're looking at on our slide, I don't know if Dan's got the slide up there, our training outline, or Matt
Yep,
does.
I will get it up.
Okay.
Yep, just give me 1 second.
So the first point that we're talking about is understanding the arena business model. Now, it's kind of a broad statement there. We're not necessarily talking about how an arena is able to make it financially. We're not talking about a business plan for your local hockey arena. Other than you should know what goes on. You should know what goes on in the arena that you're in, as far as how they operate the facility financially. Anyway, you're gonna the upfront interaction with arena management is establishing an ice contract, and then they're expecting you to pay the ice contract. But what can you add to? What can you discuss? What can you work out with arena management when you sign those papers, when you decide to rent a certain amount of ice at a certain rate and you're going to be paying them so much money? What can you read into or put into the contract or discuss in the contract about the portion of of preparing the ice surface for you so that you can curl. I think it's neglected sometimes out of ice contracts. You sign the contract, the manager does not know that arena curling ice is different, that there's practices that need to be done so that you can be successful, so that your club can grow, so that you'll continue to be a customer there. So it kind of gets into the next point that we have, establishing relationships with the arena management and the arena staff. We'll talk some more about that. Arenas have so many different setups as far as who owns them. There's private arenas, there's public and private partnerships. Some municipalities own arenas. In Minnesota here, vast majority of the ice arenas are owned by municipalities. And there's all kinds of arrangements with local youth hockey. You know, the municipality would own the building, but the Youth Hockey Association is responsible for all expenses, for instance. And then there's different agreements going forward. The arena where I worked at, totally owned by the city, and when I was there, it ran a deficit. It runs a deficit today. The taxpayers in town pay the deficit, pay the subsidy, and they're happy. Does not happen all over like that. We're in a winter sports culture, and the taxpayers believe it's worth it, and it is. And so it's kind of fortunate too, because you know it's a perfect fit for arena curling club to be established. I understand, like in the GNCC in the East Coast, most of your rinks are privately owned, isn't that? I would assume they're privately owned, or they have conglomerations of hockey teams that own the facilities, and they have associations that are part of it, sponsored a lot of times by large corporations and so forth. It's a wholly different thing. When you're paying that ice rate per hour, realize that the ice industry is a really, really tough industry as far as profit margins and paying off debt and huge capital investments. It's like something that it's a business that is planned for many, many, many years down the road, because the debt service takes so long. They're expecting the facility to operate and the equipment to operate for 40 years, and it doesn't, and all those kinds of things. So if you're thinking, oh, maybe we could negotiate the ice rate down with the arena, it typically is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. They have their set revenues, and that's it. So we have to think about negotiating other things like the quality of the ice surface that we can curl on. And one of the things that we can do is help them to understand that if we're renting 3 hours of straight ice time, and there's no Zamboni out on the ice, and there's no man on that Zamboni that's getting a wage, and they're not putting hot water that they've heated onto the ice surface every hour on the hour, like they're renting for a hockey rental or for perhaps a figure skating rental. You have to make that point clear to them. And you want to try and put that maintenance of the ice sheet that they assume is done on an hourly basis, to try and put that in the front end of your rental. You want that extra time in the front end so they can do a proper job of preparing the ice for you. So, and then teaching them how to, and the techniques of making that proper ice surface, that's a whole other thing in the training. So I'm going to turn this over to Ken Tonis now, because he's in Colonial Curling in Massachusetts. They have experience, I think their arena curling experiences at like 3 or 4 different arenas. And maybe he can tell you how, you know, from one arena to the next, and what are some of the things that you're going to face, some of the things that you might run into. and you first move into the arena and you're first going to get acquainted with the arena management and see what you can decide on together would be best to grow your club. So Ken, are you listening? And could you want to mention a few things?
I am. So yeah. So we've moved around 3 times. We're on our 3rd arena. We're just under 5. We'll be 5 years next May. So we've moved quite a bit. We started off in a facility that we thought would be a really great arena. It was a facility that had 6 full-size rinks and had plans to expand to 2 more, to add 2 more rinks to their facility. So we were really looking forward to being a part of it and really getting into being able to really hopefully make a good stake in one of those rinks. The issue that we ran into, the biggest thing with a facility that size, is that they never kept us consistently on the same rink, which was really tough. You know, you got 4,000 pounds of equipment that you're moving from rink to rink, and you know, in a facility that has 8 rinks, you know, it's not just a couple of feet that you're moving your equipment. So we ran into a lot of problems with that, and then we were running into problems where we were trying to get certain things done on our ice, and the management of the facility was really, you know, interested in doing it. The drivers were a little bit interested, but it really kind of came down to that they never had enough staff on for those 8 rinks, right? So they had drivers that were running from rink to rink, and it really hurt overall the quality of the club, and just didn't really allow us to expand. So we moved to another rink, which was about 25 minutes away. It ended up, you know, it added to some people's commutes. It made it closer for other people. But the facility itself was really interested in having curling and being a part of the facility. One of the things at the previous facility was that they always said that they would put houses in for us, but never did. This new facility was willing to put them in immediately. And they said, you know, part of the contract was that within 30 days of us starting curling there, they would install the houses. And they kept to their word. I think it was about 21 days after we got the houses in, and they scheduled time, and we were able to bring in a crew of people to get them installed. And the good thing about, you know, we had 2 nights there, and unfortunately after signing that first initial contract, which was for the same amount that we were paying at the previous facility, they decided to up our rate by 20%, which was a huge hit to the club. And then they also took a night away from us. So now not only did we have the added pressure of paying more money for the ice, we also didn't have the ability to add more people to hopefully generate more revenue, which ultimately led us to the current relationship that we have, which is with a company called Edge Sports here in Massachusetts, and they've got rinks in Massachusetts and in Maine, and they have been phenomenal to work with. With them, when we first sat down and were talking to them about the contract, they asked us what we were looking for in terms of contract. We were explaining the ice procedures and things like that. And then when we brought up the length of the contract, we weren't sure what they were thinking of, and they immediately offered a 5-year contract to us. So we know right now that we're in a really good position. The houses were already installed in this facility because they had a charity event the year before. So they were willing to install them, and they got everything in there, and their Zamboni drivers are working with us. You know, we've got them doing in the figure 8 or X cut for us on a regular basis. And it's just been, you know, I think the biggest thing is really finding a facility that really wants you there and wants to be a partner versus being another customer. And that's where we were with the other 2 facilities. This is one where we know we're in a nice cohesive relationship with them, and they look at our success as their success, And with everything that's been going on this year with COVID, and when rinks have shut down, hockey got shut down for a couple weeks here in Massachusetts, and we were fortunate because because curling isn't really known as a sport in Massachusetts. They didn't shut down all on ice activities. They shut down ice skating and hockey. So we were able to continue, and it was a huge benefit for us. And and I think it's just we're looking forward to getting more ice time from them, and just being able to offer events and different learn to curls and things like that. So yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is just the relationship that you can build with the facility, and looking at it as a partnership versus we're just renting ice from you, or they're looking at you as you're just another tenant for right now, and we'll sell the ice out from under you if we so choose. So we've really been lucky in the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah, that's very extraordinary. I mean, I like how you had the experience then to sit down and negotiate and explain the needs that you had when it was first sitting down to contract for the ice. So, I mean, your other experiences, I'm sure, guided you and helped you be able to have that conversation. And that really leads us to the second point, just exactly what you said. And I like the how you spoke about that, because our second point is working with and educating the facility staff. And you did that from the very get-go when you sat down and wrote out the ice usage contract. The other part of that, the facility staff, you have more than just the management. You have the people that are going to be actually jumping on that machine and doing the work for you in resurfacing the ice and preparing it for the curling. I kind of like to, and it's kind of one of my ideas. It'd be nice if we could change some work titles from Zamboni driver. How about if that person's title was resurfacer, resurfacing ice technician, instead of Zamboni driver? If you can get a relationship with your Zamboni driver and really treat him as an ice technician, not just a driver, that I think it's kind of showing how much you appreciate that person. So that's very important. Unfortunately, so many arenas have you don't get the same driver every time, the same ice technician to operate the resurfacer every time it's your turn to curl. And so it's like it's a tough thing for the arena to teach all, but they should. And maybe that is another point that could be put in the contract, that you would like a person designated to be the ice technician for your curling, to prepare the ice for your curling night. I think that'd be another good thing that you could throw in. Other than that, curlers are, from my opinion, and I ran an arena for 27 years, and 15 of those years we had curlers in there, are the best customers you could ever have in an arena. Polite, they're easy to take care of. You don't have big messes to clean up, locker rooms, all that kind of thing. Curlers don't spit on the floor. I've never seen a curler spit on the floor. Do hockey players spit on the floor, I wonder? He's an old hockey player. That's just an aside, but treating your Zamboni drivers, and I'm not going to say this, I'm saying this publicly, and here we are, I'm going to stay in my lane, but treat your Zamboni drivers, treat your ice technicians once in a while. Do you do that? This holiday season, give them a gift. if he's doing a good job, I mean, you're not going to reward bad work, but I mean, I'll tell you an example of La Crosse, Wisconsin. And if you live in Wisconsin and you want somebody to get to do something for you, and I gave him this suggestion and it worked out like a charm for their Zamboni driver. If he did a good job, there was a case of beer left in the Zamboni room the next day. And man, they had really good ice for the rest of that season. That's all it took. Now, is that a bribe or is it a gift? I don't know. But at any rate, think of those folks that are doing, if they're doing a good job, praise them and keep working with them so that you can improve. So now we're going to move. Russ, are we moving along about the right time? I'm not sure. He's going to talk here a little bit.
You're fine, Kevin. You have plenty of time. You could take a little bit of your time if you want.
Yeah. All right. So what we're moving into our next point is differences between skating ice and curling ice. So that's just some basic information I can give you. And you know, for skating ice, how accurate do you have to be out on the ice sheet for skating, for playing hockey, for figure skating? Accuracy, and I'm talking about accuracy of flatness, two-dimensional flatness, flat one direction and the other direction. It's not way up there on the list. It isn't. Arena workers or maintenance guys don't think of really level. They think of level ice in terms of ice thickness. Is it consistent thickness all around the rink? That's more of their concern, but they're not really getting into the fine details of being flat. Now, it all depends on what's underneath the ice. I mean, sand floors, for one thing, guys, floors are much harder to maintain a level surface flatness than a concrete floor. Sand floors have a tendency at beginning of the season to swell up until everything gets kind of set in place. The perimeters take a little longer to freeze up, the centers kind of bow up, and the ice thickness is much thicker on a sand floor. So if you're curling in a sand floor, you can't kind of have the same expectations of a concrete floor. Sand floors can be maintained and leveled, a little bit more difficult because it's a little harder to do all the procedures, but concrete floors, there shouldn't be too much of a issue with keeping those floors level if they do proper maintenance. Differences, our third point is differences between skating ice and curling ice. Well, hockey ice is typically colder. It could be 1 degree or 2 degrees colder. And in our rink, we had to start our hockey ice a little bit colder in the beginning of the day, because as the successive resurfacings on the hour continued throughout the night, that temperature of the ice itself kept heating up. And you didn't want to have soft ice in the third period of a good hockey game at the close of the night. You didn't want, and the goalies liked it because you got all that snow out there and it's slowed the puck up. But the skaters didn't enjoy that. They wanted that hard, crisp ice. So we had to start our ice out a little colder in the day, and so that the plant could keep up properly, so it didn't get out of line. Now, curling ice, a couple of degrees colder, so that's one of the differences. So we talked about flatness and ice temp. And of course the surface, and that's what you have to teach. And if you go into an arena, they don't know that they have to dry scrape the ice for the curlers, then you're going to have to educate them on that. So I'm going to ask Dave Geiger, who's the head ice tech at Plymouth State University, to chip in now. Dave is a great arena curling ice maker too. And I'd like him to talk about some of the differences that he sees that he has to contend with having a college hockey team on the ice, and then you're going to have to convert to skating through a skating program. I know the bigger the players are, it's harder to maintain and keep the ice. And Dave, are you there? Can you chip in on anything on that?
I'm here. Thanks, Kevin,
Yes.
for giving me the opportunity. I am, like Kevin said, I'm the manager up here in Central New Hampshire at Plymouth State University. We have obviously two varsity programs, competitive varsity programs, and we have a curling club. So being a novice or above novice curler, I take a little bit extra effort in making sure that the ice is appropriate, because being the only ice maker and a curler, I hear it when I'm on the ice, a lot of the side comments, what's up with the ice tonight? So I spend a little bit extra time, making sure the ice is playable on all sheets. Some of the things these are a lot of things that are out of our control. When I say our control, club controls, because you don't necessarily have the ability to hop on the Zamboni and do the ice sheet, or maybe you're, as I refer to them, Kevin, operator, the Zamboni operator.
Mhm.
Are they going to listen to the curlers? Well, the one thing you can do is get your Zamboni driver out there to curl. Have him throw some stones to show him what the ice is doing. Kevin just talked about a level ice surface. Now, for weeks, we go out and we measure the thickness of the ice. We want to make sure the ice is thick enough to support all the programming that we have going on. Well, we were curling for two weeks now, and for some reason, the stones kept falling to the boards. My ice charts told me that I had 1.5 inches of ice thickness across the whole thing. Well, come to find out, when we did some leveling floods, all the water ran to the boards, which was telling me that our floor was not level. The only way we found this out was to go and do a leveling flood. And for those of you that don't know what a leveling flood is, you're going down and putting about 1,000 gallons across the entire ice surface and letting that water just migrate to the lowest points and leveling the surface, not thickness wise, but just trying to give you a flat surface across the top. Very difficult as a user, where ice in the Northeast is at a premium. You can't just say, hey, can we do another leveling flood? Well, that leveling flood takes about an hour to do, and to give up an hour of ice time just to level it is kind of hard to ask of your arena. You might be able to, like Kevin said, either some adult beverages, or for a guy like me, the way to my heart is through my stomach. I'm a sucker for a good chocolate chip cookie. So if those end up on my my Zamboni room, I'm just as happy as that adult beverage. So a couple things to think about if you can talk to your arena managers. Edging. Now, Zamboni drivers are notorious for going very slow around the outside of the rink, and then they love to drag race up and down the middle. They like to go as fast as they can because they're obviously on a time clock. So what that presents is a bowl effect. We have higher edges and thinner middles. And so I think we've all experienced that dreaded outside sheet when you have to throw directly at the boards and it naturally just falls to the middle, and that's your one shot that you can get with that out turn in order to maintain the stone going straight down the ice. We've all experienced that one time. If you can talk to your managers and your operators, like, hey, can you guys get on a regular edging schedule to keep that outside edge, mowed down, as we refer to it, or just kept down, that will help maintain that level surface that we're looking for. For those of you that don't have houses installed in your sheet and you have to draw your houses every time you play, see if you can move those houses to the middle of the ice. Don't put them all the way out to the edge. Try to move them to the center of the ice. We did that our first year. We had them nice and they were beautifully spread out evenly across the whole surface. And then all of a sudden, when they started to play less than desirable, we suck them right to the middle of the ice. And that really helped us over the season. Now our season is spring, summer, and fall, so we're a little odd in our scheduling, but it really helped with the level of play. It made it much easier. All the sheets played much more equally across the boards, the outside and the inside sheets. So if you, as Ken said earlier, if you can negotiate in your contracting time the X cut, it is a huge it's a huge advantage to have that done. If your Zamboni is just doing a dry cut north and south, you create trenches, and you'll find the stone will wallow back and forth through that trench, where if you do the X cut, it knocks down that trench and just gives you a little bit more of a flat surface to play on. So like I said, I'm very fortunate that I have a sandbox and I get to keep that sandbox as level as possible. But those are just some of the couple things. The leveling flood is great to do if you can do it once or twice a season. You know, going out after hours. Hey, would you mind if we come in after hours and level the ice for you? And you take a garden hose out there and a nozzle and you flood the ice. Another thing that we can ask for, you know, the X cut, the edging, the leveling flood. Those three things are key. You know, talking to your arena manager and seeing if they are able to maybe schedule a children's practice right before you skate, as opposed to a high-end varsity practice. If there's any maneuverability in their schedule when you have your ice, it's always nice to have an 8-year-old skate on the ice right before curling, as opposed to an 18-year-old. That 18-year-old, or figure skaters, for example, you'll have the dreaded toe pick blowout that always likes to hook a stone, or that huge rut, or if they're running practice and they're using the houses as skating circles and they go around and around and around and they create the ruts right around the house. You know, ask them if there's any, work with your coaches. I mean, you can talk to everybody and they'll listen to you. It's, I think I heard a story once that there was a group of cheerleaders in Las Vegas at a convention, and all the hotel people dreaded the bloody cheerleaders and their parents. They were just miserable people. Yet there was a curling event coming into town, and they were bringing out drinks to everybody, and they were smiling, and people didn't mind to wait. So as Kevin said, curlers are a different animal, and I don't think I've ever seen a grumpy curler come into the rink. Just we're all human. Talk to us. Talk to your rink manager. Again, buy them a cookie. I love cookies. So it's something to just talk to them about. I think I just saw, Matt, someone had put that figure eight, the figure eight cut. I think Kevin has a video on YouTube of the figure eight. And I think Matt or Ken, you videoed me doing that as well, I believe. If not, we're down. I might be able to shoot a video if nobody has it, and we can get that posted up. But it's basically, it's not the letter 8 as you would think, like an 8 this way. It's a diagonal cut across.
Yeah.
As I'm drawing on my screen, it's a diagonal cut across the ice, not the figure
Right.
that you would think. So
I think maybe Dan or Matt has that. Do you have that drawing as a slide?
I sent it to Russell.
Okay.
It's on the slide pack.
Okay.
I have it all. I will
On
bring
the
it back
slide
up.
pack.
Yeah, so
All right.
it's more of a 45-degree pass across the sheets, not necessarily the number 8 per se.
Yep. Well, there's that. There we go. That's a hand-drawn drawing that I made, trying to replicate what happens when we're out there doing the figure eight. Now we have a 5-sheet club, so I've got to go, all the way to the boards on my turns there. But you notice where all the end turning is turning on top of turning on top of turning, but that's outside of the houses. That's outside of the houses. So when you're running that that pattern, you're going over the houses. You're not turning directly on the houses. Otherwise you'd polish them down. You'd have kind of like a dip for them there. So you're not taking off hardly anything, you know, and as resurfacer guys, we look at our snow tank on the Zamboni, and that's how we gauge how we're doing out there, how much snow we're taking off. We hear it in the augers that as it passes through the machine, you get so used to the machine, you kind of know what the machine is doing and how much it's cutting. But when you're doing the figure eight at the final there, it's like maybe 1/8 of a tank of snow or something. It's that fine. You're not doing much, which I'd like to mention too, and Dave talked about it, that first straight dry cut, you want to try and make that as light as possible also. You don't have your driver horse that blade down. He thinks it's great if it's just chewing away a nice path there and the ice looks real white and flat there. But if he's got that blade too low, he's really creating that ridge that we're talking about. Because when you do the overlapping, the machine is going to drop in, the one edge of the machine is going to drop into the edge that you just cut, and the other one is still riding up on the uncut ice. And that continual pattern like that over makes that lap after lap after lap of somewhat unlevel ice with a ridge. So you're trying to minimize that ridge for the first dry cut, and then you're going to do the figure eight or the X cut as shown there, so that you finish it off. Now, when I do it, I only shave the curling areas. I do not shave the whole rink. And I don't know if your drivers are doing that or not. When they're going out there and dry shaving, maybe they feel they have to keep their ice level for the next rental or whatever, but it isn't really that big of a deal. So I concentrate just on shaving the curling sheets. It saves time. And I can stay out there on the rink with the machine and do this dry cut and the figure eight cut and still have enough room in my tank for all the snow that is taken off. So you don't have to go and dump and then go back out on the ice and then start up again. That wastes another 3-4 minutes. So altogether, we're looking at the process that takes it should take about 20 minutes. If you've got a good fast driver and you're just doing the curling sheets, get out there, dry shave, turn around, do that X. It should take 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more. And so if you're in an ice contract where they're only giving you 15 minutes, like they're giving for resurfacing hockey ice or skating ice, that's something that you got to negotiate and try get them to give that time in the front end that you would not be using in the middle of your rental to do an ice resurface. The other chart that was up for just a second, Dan or Matt, it showed some an ice rink with some figures on it. Let's put that slide up if you could.
Kevin, before I move, I'm just going to chime in with, as far as negotiating, one thing you might be able to do if they're a capable rink manager, they do need to schedule some time for ice maintenance.
Yes.
And the way I justify my efforts in making the ice is I don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining the ice because I'm using that time in curling prep to do my ice maintenance. So if you're able to swing it with your in your negotiation to say, hey, can you, in exchange for 15 minutes of time, would you mind doing these cuts? It'll give you a level surface. You can work your corners down and your employees don't have to stay after hours to work on the ice because you're doing that work during normal business. So it's just something to try to swing in there if you can. And that's how I use it in justification for what I do up here at Plymouth.
I'll jump in on there with Dave too. I gave the figure eight to Colonial, the rink they're at now. They actually are now using it on the rink that we don't curl on because they're finding the benefits of that figure eight. So
that's great. Yeah. So
Kevin, we have a question on the chat.
okay.
Scott Price from Colonial Broomstones and TCC is asking, So you suggest one north-south dry cut, sheets only, and then dry cut, X cut?
That's correct. That's correct. But remember now, and then this is kind of technical, and Dave alluded to it. When you do that X cut, we're actually, the driver needs to raise the blade up. It needs to raise the blade up, and then he approaches the ice sheet, or approaches the lane that he wants to cut, and then he slowly drops that blade down until he can see behind him. He can see behind him, the blade is clipping off the ridge that he created by the straight north and south cut. You can actually see it. And if you're watching this, and Dan, I'm sure you watched them and they do it, you can look down, scope down the ice sheet and see how that you can actually see it, can't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's depending, and it just, as again, it's another kind of exception to the rule, depending on the programming that happens before curling. If we have for example, a heavy varsity practice, I actually have to make a full sheet of ice. I have to go out,
Yes.
I have to save about 3/4 of a bin of snow, and I actually have to lay water down to
Yes.
fill in the ruts. Then I will go out, I'll come in off of the ice, I'll dump the machine. That takes me about 10 minutes. Now I'm ready to start the curling. When I go into north and south dry cut, I'll take off maybe a half a bin of snow. Then I'll go right into my X cut, and I will take off, like Kevin said, I'll turn the blade up maybe 1 revolution, just so I'm just nipping the top of that ridge. So if I get a little bit of a gully, I'm just coming across the top and I'm just skimming this ridge right off. And I take off about 1/4 of bin. Those 2 cuts take me about 15 minutes. So I'm about roughly 30 minutes,
30 minutes in.
of Zamboni time. While that's going on, our employees or club members, if you're able to negotiate this with your rink, to put your stones out while this is
Yes.
going on up against the edge of the board, that saves in your prep time. That starts cooling your stones. And they're staging all the other equipment, chairs or stabilizers or whatever else, out of the way of the Zamboni. So as soon as they come off the ice, they're immediately putting the hacks down, and within 10 minutes, you're pebbling, and stones are getting moved into place, and you're getting set up. So, start to finish with 2 people, we're set up to curl in about 45 minutes with just two people. And of that 45, 30 of it is Zamboni driving.
Right.
So it is doable. So
Very doable. And there's your say you have a 3-hour time block that you rented, and the arena, if it would rented those 3 hours of skating ice to the hockey club, they would have been out there 3 times with the Zamboni resurfacing at 15 minutes a time. That's 45 minutes. We're just putting it in the front end. You're just putting it into the front end of the rental. It's as simple as can be. And not only that, the ice, after it's conditioned for curling, the ice is great. And Dave Geiger, you can chip in on this too. But we have on Thursdays, we're able to curl on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But after Thursday at 7 o'clock, we're done, and the figure skaters take over. And so then we go out and do a wet cut or a flood over the curling ice that we have curled on that's been prepped. And of course, it's like glass. The surface is like glass. They love it. Our figure skating club was asked by the hockey if they'd move and we'll bring in hockey after curling, and they adamantly refused. He said, no, we are not going to miss out on that fantastic ice that we get after curling. So they refused to move. Our curling club calls it divine ice. When they get to skate after curling, they call it divine ice, because it is. And so you see how curling in your rink can improve the quality of your ice sheet and create happiness for the other groups. Now look at the chart that we have, the slide that we have. Now we need to explain that. This is an ice depth chart, ice thickness chart. It's real common. And I don't know, well, if you're an ice rink and you don't do this, I don't know what you're doing. But this is a chart. This fellow, I put it on Facebook just a couple of days ago, and I was really excited that he did because, well, let's say he was boasting how great his ice was, and that was just great as far as I'm concerned, because I commented to him that this would be really good arena curling ice. Now, others commented about, okay, is that concrete floor under these ice measurements exactly level? Chances are it's not. I mean, there isn't a concrete floor out there that's absolutely perfect. I mean, I've seen some really good ones, and I've seen some horrible jobs that are, you know, a couple inches off at least, or maybe more when they were poured. I mean, I can't see how it could possibly happen. But typically, a concrete floor poured in an arena with today's specs, and if it's a modern, it's a recently built arena or not too very old, the floor is going to be pretty good. I mean, the specs have gotten really good, and the equipment they use for screening concrete has gotten better with lasers and so forth. So actually, you might see a difference in flatness north and south and east and west of perhaps a quarter of an inch in an entire concrete floor. So these figures that you see here, if that floor like has a few low spots, a few high spots, having the ice thickness level here exactly the same all over doesn't mean that it's exactly level. It means it's duplicating the floor that's underneath it. And he had one, I think, in the one face-off circle there, he's got 1 2/3 of an inch compared to 1 3/4. Boy, he's really getting technical. Now, how they do this, they generally have like a dulled masonry bit in a drill, and they go down and they have that drill bit incremented out in measurements, and you drill down through the ice, you hit the concrete, and then you take your reading, you measure the drill bit, and then you take your reading on your ice. Now, if you got a sand floor, you can't do that. I mean, you're going to drill down, and depending on what's there, you could drill into a tube. So arenas that are really concerned, sand floor arenas where they're really concerned about ice thickness and ice levelness, they have plates. They have metal plates installed in very logistic spots all around the rink. So, and they've got it figured out where they can drill without hitting a tube, but they drill down to that plate. And that's how they measure their ice. And the sand floor is going to have more ice on it than a regular concrete floor, probably an inch more or more. But that's how they can tell. Now, there's a lot of sand floors, especially in practice facilities where we end up curling, sand floor practice facility, they're not going to have that. And they just go by, guess by gosh, how level the ice is, unless you get a rotary laser level and can help them out. That's one of the tools that I preach that arenas should have. You just have an arena, have a rotary laser level that they can do this leveling work with. And I've even suggested that if it's a real concern, but if the arena is willing to use the tool, that your curling club has a fundraiser and you go out and buy one of those for the arena, let them use it. You're talking a decent rotary laser level of about $600, $700. And I mean, it's an investment that's well worth it, because if it increases the fun and the quality of curling, you're gonna increase your membership or keep your membership up there by it. It's a great investment. So on this particular chart here, I would say if this was an arena curling club, they'd be doing pretty good for a person. They'd be doing pretty good.
Kevin, if I may,
yes.
As a curler, I don't necessarily care how thick the ice is. I want it to be level. So wouldn't the level of the ice surface be more important to measure than the thickness of the ice?
Not for
example,
the,
I'm an engineer. I have access to surveying equipment. We've used
Yep.
our survey tools on the ice surface before to map the surface of the ice
yes.
for our arena.
Yep, and what the arena is concerned about is thickness because they're thinking about energy. So they don't want thick spots on the rink. Remember Dave told you about how it gets thick in the corners from slow turning and they speed up out in the middle. And you know, if they don't maintain that, if they don't use the edger and they don't do these ice checks like this, they're going to get ice in the corners that's going to be 2.5 to 3 inches thick before you know it. And anytime you add another inch of ice on top of your floor there, your energy costs go up a certain percent. It increases incrementally as the thicker the ice gets. So they're not concerned if they don't understand curling and flatness of the ice, they're doing these depth checks for energy saving. They really are, mostly. And for clarity of the lines. So if the corners get thick and you get 3 inches of ice in the corners, that goal line is going to fade away into like you can't even see it, and the referees don't like that. So some of those things come into play. The other thing is, and we can at another time we'll talk about quality water and all that kind of thing, but logos out on the ice and advertising logos, if you let your ice get too thick, and your logos start getting to the point where you can't even see what the logo is out there, that's not a bit, you're not selling very good advertising to that sponsor. Let's put it that way. So thickness in the ice also has to do with clarity and the visibility of logos and lines. But to answer your question, yeah, if they're not thinking curling, they're not thinking flat. They're thinking consistent ice layer all over the floor. Okay. So I was gonna come up with one other point. Now I forgot it. We were talking about thickness. Oh, we were going to talk about, and I know this is, it gets even more technical. And I don't know, Ken Tonis, if you have that ability yet. It seems like you have a tremendous relationship with your arena, but the other element that comes to play in really good curling ice is our ice surface temperature. And it's not easy to regulate that unless you have the ice technicians in the arena kind of understanding what curling is and why you would like to have a certain, we shoot for 23 degree surface ice temp and get close to that 22, because remember we were talking about hockey ice is colder, and now you're not resurfacing the ice because you're in the curling mode now. So you're not running the Zamboni out there. You're not distributing 150 gallons of hot water on the hour. The ice then it's played out there, and it gets a little bit colder and colder as your curling night goes on, because it doesn't have that heat load on there, even though you have players out there and this and that. So it's not getting any warmer for you to play typically. So if you can visit with your ice technicians there at the arena and see if they have a sophisticated controller that has a calendar and a schedule on it, where the plant would let the ice temp move up 2 degrees during your time, and then it comes back automatically back down to their hockey settings, to their hockey set points. That's a huge advantage. We have that at the arena now. We've always had it because I've known how to go back there and turn the dial, and I was allowed to do that. Now they have a new plant, brand new plant. It's all sophisticated, all computerized. It's all on the phone. It's all of that. All I have to do is call on my phone. I send a message to one of the ice techs there. I'd like the ice 2 degrees higher. And I've got a thermal gun. This is a great investment for any arena curling club too. Buy a thermal gun, even if it's through the cheaper Black & Decker or whatever. get a thermal gun, shoot the ice, see where ice temperature is at, shoot your rocks too, see what temperature they are. Maybe you can find a way to cool those rocks, and maybe those rocks are a little warm. That's why they're moving slow up and down the ice. But I have that ability now. I can just a text message, and the plant and the ice temp comes up for us from the curl. It makes a world of difference. So we're getting up into that dependable, for arena curling ice, we're getting up to dependable 23-second ice. That's fun ice. So, and that's just one of the other things. So, we're kind of moving it right down the line. We kind of got into like equipment storage too, talking about cooling rocks. That's our next point is equipment storage, and some of the things that you can do. And I'm kind of going to rely on all of you to give a bit of information if you have. But Brandon Jackson is on the line here, and he's up there in Pennsylvania, right, Brandon? And he's a real whiz as far as coming up with equipment how they store their stones and how they move things around. And Brandon, you want to chip in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so we have about half of our stones in freezers, just like several clubs do that now. We only have enough for half right now, but we're working on getting more. So to move our stones from those freezers to keep them cool, not frozen but cool, so they cool down to ice temp, fairly quick. So we have an old gurney from a hospital. So we put a plastic sheet down on top of it to protect the stones. Stones go on there. We roll them over to the ice, take them off onto the ice directly, slide them over out of the way, and then our other half we have in steel cages with carpet down at the bottom to keep them protected. And we roll that whole cage right over to the door and unload it right to the ice. That keeps it's fairly quick. We get 2, 3, 4 people. It takes 10 minutes maybe to unload all the stones. While that's happening, and we have people getting the hacks out, everything's coming out to the doors of the arena while they're doing the ice, where the Zamboni's running. We get our pebble cans ready. Everything is ready to go as soon as we can get on the ice. So we have everything on wheels as much as possible. Our brooms, sliders, all that stuff is on rolling carts, so we can roll it right out to the door. I'm not sure what else to mention.
How is it for your situation there? Are you able to get right out on the ice and set up as far as the mopping and pebbling and all that stuff? How are you structured to do that? Do you have an ice crew that's one pebbler and one mop? I mean, how is the workload distributed in your club?
So it's whoever's there first. Usually it's right after work, so most people get there when they can get there, and they'll help out as soon as they can. We have a couple pebblers that normally do it, a couple moppers, typical people to do it all the time. One thing that helps us get set up a little quicker is the way the Zamboni runs their pattern. We don't do the X cut, but we do a wet cut normal, north to south, and then a dry cut across the ice. So they start at the far end, and then after they get past the hacks, we start mopping and putting the hacks in and everything. We're drawing our houses in, and they're just going down the ice. So by the time he's off, we're finishing up the next set of hacks and houses and everything. So that helps us a little faster getting going too.
In a way, that X cut or that cross cut too, I mean, that's better than just having the straight up and downs. I can tell you that. Especially if he's able to set that blade so that he's actually getting the long lap marks out. Sometimes when you cross cut like that, you get what's called rock hop, and then it starts to hop. You get a little bit of that because then it can start to hop over every ridge instead of falling into a ridge and not getting out. Then it hops over every ridge. And that's kind of a unusual sound when you have that, by the way.
Yep.
And you kind of, you can tell when, you might not be able to see, but you can hear a lot of times rock hop when you're delivering. And sometimes it does, I don't know if you've noticed it, but sometimes it kind of plays to your advantage. I don't know how to say that, but I mean, it grabs it grabs and doesn't grab and grab. And once you figure it out, you manage to curl your stone pretty well.
Yep.
Yeah.
It seems to handle a little better than, catching a ridge though. So that,
Yes,
takes the
it
same way
is.
every time.
Yes,
So it's a little
it is.
more consistent that way, but
So anybody else have some key tips on equipment storage? We had a rock freezer system that was the city energy did an energy audit, and we had our old, they were too old. The freezers that we were using were too old, and the energy audit guy put an X on them, and we had to throw them out the building because he said that's using too much energy. So we scuttled that, and then we haven't really had the authority to build another system in our arena. So what we have to do is store our stones on the backside of the hockey boards down where the dasher boards are the coldest, and in the corner of the building where it's blocked off, there's no people back there, so they're secure and everything, and it's cold back in that corner. And we can get our stones to, well, I would say they're at 40 degrees, which is just a little bit too warm. So we have to bring our stones out on carts too, and we have to put them down on plastic mesh, and we use the landscape plastic mesh. It has all those perforated holes in it so that we get that coldness to come through, and we put our stones down on the plastic mesh while the guys are scraping, while they're doing the dry scrape and the X, much like Dave Bayer was talking about. So our stones are out there, and they're cooling. They're cooling down during that process. It's, for that half an hour of prep or whatever. And even when we're, the last thing we do is to bring our rocks up and put them onto the curling sheets to curl. And typically they're not going to mark. They're not going to donut in the ice at all. But I know they're a little bit warmer than they should be, because the first draw, they're, one of the reasons why they're quicker in the second draw is because they're continually cooling down. And it's just amazing how those rocks, they're a mass of granite, and they keep heat for a while. It's a slow process to get that out of there. So setting up for play is our last feature that we're going to talk about. And in our situation, I have an ice crew that helps me, and maybe some of you can describe how you set up different than what we do. So maybe there's some points that I can learn, but basically we have a crew of 5 solid guys that show up for setup. And we can also use a couple of the bodies just to do some other things that need to be done. But, we've got 2 of us that pebble, and actually 3 of us that pebble, because I'm not always there. And in fact, I encourage the others to pebble too. And I'll be the inspector and walk along and see how the pebble's coming along. But we have, if we're going to put our base coat down, one of us is going to be timing the pebbler. He's going to be timing to see what his pace is, and he's going to be walking alongside, and he's going to be looking to see how he's getting the pebble out there. If his swing is too short, or if it's too long, all of those kinds of things. So we have somebody always walking and watching and timing our pebbler. And that ensures that, we get some consistency out there where they're pebble. It's the proper thing to do. And then if I'm doing the finishing coat, I want somebody timing me, because I'm notorious for going too fast on my first round because I'm hyper and excited, and I'm doing this and doing that, and I want to get going in this curl, and I'm excited, and I'm too fast, and then I got to pace myself, take some breaths, and slow down and get it right. So those are just some of the things. So we've got two or three pebblers, but we have 2 or 3 that are very good at just organizing, setting hacks. We bring out all the hockey bumpers, that rink dividers, and use them as bumpers in the back so that the rocks don't go sliding all the way back to the dasher board. So we have some people that do that, and that's very easy to do. And then the scoreboards have to be hauled out, and as I said before, the rocks have to be brought out. And as far as the rocks, basically, I only have a couple of fellows that do the rocks. You don't want somebody that doesn't know how to push a rock cart pushing rocks. And even unloading the rocks, you don't want somebody that's going to hurt themselves by unloading the rocks if they don't know what they're doing. But the rocks are the heart of the club. You have to take care of them. You have to be very fussy with them. And that's one of the things that I kind of insist on, that the guys that are experienced can handle the rocks. So that's the way we do it. Does anybody else have some tips on setup, what you do different, what you'd like to do? Any questions? In fact, it's probably time to ask any other questions that we have here. We're down to the end of our points here in this program. So if there's questions, I think we need to, or anything you need to ask, you should probably be doing that.
So Kevin, there was a question from a person asking about ice and sand floors and how common are cracks in sand floors, and what's the impact of having cracks in sand floors?
Well, I know that sand floors crack because they move around a bit. Now, are they in an environment where there's no heat? Some of these sand floors in practice facilities, there's no heat in the building at all. They're just so tremendously cold in there that the ice sheet cracks because of the continual contraction of the ice out there. And the other thing is, when you first put the ice in, when you first put the ice in the sand floor, there's a lot of cracking that goes on because that thing is moving around like crazy. In fact, I've seen where they drive the Zamboni out at a certain thickness and deliberately crack the ice and get it all cracked up, and then it kind of, all those pieces kind of bond together, and then when you resurface on top of that, they all heal together. So basically, I've cracked the ice a couple of times that are in these, not just our sand floor, but because I did an inadvertent meltdown rink flood because the compressor tripped out and I didn't catch it. And I came back the next morning and we had the aquatic center instead of the civic center. And then I was faced with the Bumpy Spiel starting at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I pulled the rink temp down. I babied it down, but I pulled it down too fast. So a problem. Dave Geiger, you're up. Have you had experience in cracked floors, sand floors?
Yes, I've only, both rinks that I've worked at have been concrete floors, but I did have some kind of offline conversations on this question. Like you said, Kevin, a lot of it is due to excessive cold, an excessive amount of water. Like you've said, when you bring the machine out, all of a sudden it will crack. With a sand floor, if you don't have underfloor heating, you may get frost heaves.
Yes.
I've fortunately or unfortunately seen some rinks that have had huge, and when I mean huge, inch wide, 2-inch wide gaps that the ice will just heave up and break like a traditional New England road during during season. You get huge frost heaves, and that's what's happened at the rink behind the goal crease. All of a sudden, the ice just came to a point and opened up, and that's due to just not having underfloor heating, which is a whole nother conversation, technical
Yes.
conversation in rink management, which really we have no control over. So I think in this aspect, if you're having cracking, a lot of it's going to be due predominantly to temperature.
Yeah.
The analogy that I like to use is when you take a stick of butter out of the refrigerator and you try to draw a knife across the top of it, when it's really cold, that butter breaks off into chunks.
Sure.
And as the butter warms up, you get to a point where you drag that knife across the top and it gives you a nice ribbon that it'll peel right off the top. Really nice temperature to, to spread on your toast. But then if you leave it out too long and it gets too soft, that knife will just dig right into the butter. And that's the analogy that I like to try to use.
Yeah.
You want to get the surface temperature just nice, so when that skate goes through it, that the skate carves into it and you don't get a bunch of chipping that happens. If you get
Right.
chipping in the breaking of the ice, your temperature is too cold. If you go out and you have puddles, or you can't even throw a stone down the ice because it suction, that surface
Mhm.
tension of the water and the stone, it suctions up and it stops, then your ice is too warm. So it's,
Yeah.
it's that balance. As a rink manager in our facility, I know that when I set my slab temperature at 18 degrees, that gives me a surface temperature of approximately 21 and a half
Yeah.
or 22 degrees. That is a fairly good temperature
Yes.
for us to curl on. That may not work at Kevin's rink. It may not work for Ken down at Colonial, or anybody else, that you're playing, whether it's, Long Island out in Utah, which we're fortunate to be out there as well. Every facility is different. So it's finding that, hey, what's the ice temperature tonight? As Kevin said, take a gun out, and just walk around and have somebody just randomly take a temperature. It's not, you're not spying or doing anything. I mean, I'd go as far as, when Kevin talked about taking ice steps, ask your manager, what kind of floor do you have? Do you have concrete or sand? Oh, we have a sand floor. Well, then maybe don't bring a drill with you to curling. If he has a concrete floor, just grab a drill and drill a hole and put a tape measure on it. You're just
Yeah,
trying to
certainly.
get information to try to better educate yourself. So taking temperatures, looking at the humidity levels in the rink. In arenas, you can't affect a huge change because once the settings are there, they're usually there for a reason. And to do that change, you kind of just set for the average as opposed to a dedicated club. So, where we'd like to have more control, we necessarily don't have more control, even at my level. I know that, once I set our humidity, it's set. I can't change it in our 1,000-seat facility. I can say, hey, I need 1 more degree of temperature, or I need 2% less humidity. That's going to take me hours to gain that, and it's just, I can't, for 1 curling night or 2 curling nights,
Yeah.
I just can't expect that our plant will do that, nor can I expect our people that control our HVAC systems to make all these subtle little changes. So we live with what we live, and we do the best to give them, like I said, a flat surface. But to get back to the chipping and the cracking is probably just due to excessive cold and temperature.
Okay.
Gents, if I can, Ryan Olson from Utah has his hand up. I guess he has a question. Ryan, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. First of all, Kevin, it's
Hi,
good seeing
Ryan.
you again virtually.
Hi, Ryan.
So I stepped away for a little bit, so I may have missed some things that you guys already covered. But the water quality, I think, is super important because, like, our facility has reverse osmosis, which is awesome. But I've also curled on a place that has recycled water, which is like a little dicier. And that might be more in warmer places. That might be coming up more and more. My question is about pebbling, because the survey that was sent out by GNC said that, like, pebbling is the one thing that people feel they have the most control over. And I thought that was very interesting. And then the direct question is that we have a couple pebble heads and they're kind of banged around a bit because, they've been used. Does that affect the pebbling process? And is there a way to mend it?
I don't know if there's a way to mend it. I want Dan Ostheimer to talk about this because he's got a really good experience with pebble heads. And Dan, have you ever repaired some? I know if I get well, for one thing, you got to keep them clean and maintained. And and you have to scope them out to make sure all the holes are nice and clean and open. You know, a little trick is to use a flashlight in a dark room. You can see every little hole. Use one of those tiny little flashlights like my grandkids carry around. And then you can see which ones are plugged a little bit. And then you have to be very careful when you're cleaning those. If you go to I think even Home Depot has them, but if you go to a welding supply company, they've got what's called tip cleaners, and they are rated with, it's like a tiny little round file that's has the same industrial size number as what the pebble head holes are. That's the drill bit size. And so you can match up, you look at your pebble head, if it's a 77, and you pick out that number 77 file out of that little thing, and you can just gently clean that hole open. So you don't want to do is shove something bigger in there and plunge out the holes, so now you've got ridge on it. You don't want to poke at it too badly. The other thing is that general maintenance on those pebble heads is to put them in a can of, put them in a glass of Coke for, regular Coke, Coca-Cola. It's got acid, citric acid or whatever it is in there, and it'll gently clean your pebble head. I wouldn't suggest to use anything harsher than that. If you don't know what you're doing, you can use some harsher chemicals to clean, but I would say just do that and let it sit in there for like 15 minutes. It'll clean it up really good and gets that scum out of there. When they get damaged and dented, and that does affect their efficiency, it really does, because now the volume of the pebble head is changed. The flow inside there is changed too, and it's one of the things that you should take care of, but you should invest in. If you're going to improve your pebbling, you got to have good pebble heads.
So Kevin, I would add,
Yes.
Kevin, so this is Russell, and Ryan, I would just add to this. The pebble heads are about $50 each, all right? You also could check with any of your dedicated clubs that are anywhere near your area. They usually have pebble heads that maybe are fairly new that would be still okay for you to use. But what Kevin says is if your water's dirty, you're definitely going to have to clean them often. It's a good investment to have 2 pebble heads of different sizes that you keep in good shape, all right? You want to treat them like they're glass. All right. You don't want them being thrown around. You don't want them dented. All right. It's just, it makes a big difference. And then on top of that, you want to be able to have people that can adequately pebble your ice. That's how you get the appropriate distribution of pebble all over each sheet, an equal amount. Okay. And if you do have, as you saw in our report, we talk about having 2 different temperatures, 2 different heads. At some point we'd like to do a pebble training for people, and we'll see how we'll do that. We do have a pretty good pebbling video that we can show to people, but pebbling is one of the best ways to keep your ice as good as possible. In an arena, it's a bit of a challenge because of some other factors. In a dedicated club, it's definitely the thing that can get your ice out of whack pretty quick.
One super last question, just about in terms of like when to look out for maintenance, because we're on the ice about 3 times a week. Our water is reverse osmosis, so there's not going to be a lot of minerals in it. But how often should we look to see if it needs to be checked and stuff for the pebble heads?
How often do you check your pebble heads? Is that what you're asking? How often you check your pebble heads?
It's not about maintenance and cleaning and stuff. Like how often do you think?
Oh, I actually check my pebble heads every time I use them. Okay. I do. Yeah, just take a quick look with the flashlight. Yeah, and then of course you can see if you examine closely, you can see that I don't know what it is. Even we have RO water too. We have RO water, and then we pebble with RO with the RO put through a DI. So I mean our pebble water is 000. But even so, I don't know what it is. It's some kind of a gummy like thing that accumulates. It's maybe a breakdown of the silicone hose on your pebble can. It could be all kinds of some plastic that's breaking down slowly over time in your pebble can. I don't know where this stuff comes from, but it forms, and you have to take a look at it. And so it's really easy just to take a glance with the little flashlight. Yeah, it looks good. I'm going to go with it. Or, oh, gee, no wonder. And if you have, what we call coins, or you got quarters and dime sized drops showing up, we call that coinage out there on the ice sheet. That's showing up. It's quite often one of two things. It's a plugged hole or two, or it's a loose or worn out washer with the pebble head screws into the hose head. Those two things. So, or this year open curling, I was in a hurry. I went out. I didn't tighten down my pebble head properly. I was distracted. I didn't tighten it down to the head of the. I got halfway down the sheet and it all came apart, and I just had one big mess out there. Now what do you do? And I was tempted to bring the Zamboni out, spray flap, start over. We just curled over it because it was our first time anyway, and none of us could slide worth the darn anyway, so it didn't really matter. So I'm glad you're asking about pebble heads. I did visit, and I want to say that I will not say this arena. When I did visit an arena one time to get them started in arena curling, they'd already started a time or two before I got there, and they had been pebbling with the pebble head upside down out there. So you can imagine, and it's kind of funny because like it was a whole pebble can tank in one sheet, and I said, well, and the ice was nice and glossy from that. It was glossy, but there was no pebble bump at all. And they were sliding the stones down. So I mean, you got to ask. You got to ask. There's never a foolish question when it comes to this stuff. You got to learn somehow. You got to start somehow. That's how I started. Asking questions and learning from pros like Sean and Dave and Quentin Way. That's how I learned. So
I'm going to just jump in real quick. Getting those dents out's not going to happen. The copper is too thin. Definitely you want to replace them because more than likely you're throwing pebble off kilter somewhere. Protect those heads. I'm lucky enough, I have a crafty wife. She's made me head covers that protect my head. But I've seen guys that buy cheap mittens and shove them inside the mittens to protect them. Anything you can do to get some extra padding on that head, because it doesn't take much, especially in the arena where you're kind of tossing things around. I know Ken went out and bought a case from Harbor Freight that's got foam in it to throw the heads in. Anything like that you can do to protect those heads is key.
Mm-hmm. Dan, if I can add to that, we bought, just like from Home Depot or whatever, for $2, you can get a big sponge, like used for washing your car or something like that, and just cut a little slit into it and slide the sponge over the pebble head. It's great foamy type material, but then also you can use it to sort of wipe things down as you're finishing. And Kevin, the other thing I want to add about, you mentioned about the gunk that builds up sometimes. I'm a chemical engineer, so I apologize if I'm getting too technical. Deionized water tends to have a pH that's a little bit less than pure neutral of 7. So it tends to be a little bit acidic. And the longer you leave deionized water out exposed to air, the more carbon dioxide it will absorb and get more and more acidic. So it will dissolve certain plastics and other chemicals that it can get in contact with. So over a long period of time, you will see buildup of things of that nature. So as you mentioned, it's important to check for that.
It is, yeah.
And on top of that, RO water has no minerals, and water wants minerals. So it will try and find and absorb what it wants, which will cause two things. It will absorb actually from your pebble heads, which will actually make your pebble head holes grow over time. So that's, again, with that, what do I want to call it? The
drill bit
welder tool.
It
will tell you if your holes have gotten larger.
Yeah.
So it's 8:30, and I just want to keep on track here. I think if there's not any more questions, we can let people go and have a nice evening. So
there was one question in the chat asking about any advice on ceiling drips / moguls. Dave responded in the chat. Tom from Orlando, does that answer your question, or do you want to discuss that further?
Who's the question for?
From Tom in Orlando.
Oh, well, yeah, he's down in a humid climate and they're having trouble with their dehumidification. Is that the issue?
Yeah, the answer was about what I expected. We do get a lot of humidity down here, obviously, so ceiling drips can be a problem, not always, but they can be.
Yeah. We used to have that problem before we insulated and put dehumidification when we first began curling. And we had scrapers on the sides of the rink, and if they'd start to develop a bump, we'd quick stop play, go out there, scrape that, and play over it. Real nuisance, but we did it because we love curling. We kept on. Our first bond spiel, we've named that the Bumpy Spiel because it was in January, I believe, and we had a heat wave go through Minnesota, and I think it was like 55 degrees outside, and the whole ceiling started, all the frost in the ceiling started to melt, and it was raining in there as we were curling. There were bumps and lumps all over. So you had to learn how to play the bumps on that bond spiel. Bump to bump to bump. It was like playing pinball, you know? And I know Sean Olson, if he's on the call, he was there. He curled it. I cannot believe that we had so much fun with that, but we did. So sometimes bumps are fun. And that's the Bumpy Spiel from about 15 years ago, long before I knew anything about how to make ice. So. Okay.
All right. It doesn't look like there are any additional
No
questions.
more questions?
Oh, sorry. Oh, Brandon's just responding about the drips. So yeah,
Okay.
It looks like we're good.
Great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you, Kevin. We appreciate your expertise, and
Hope to see you all down the road. That's for sure.
Dave and Ken and Dan and everybody else who contributed. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Russell, is there anything you want to say to close out?
No, I think we're all set. It's really nice to have so many people attend, and it's, as you said, it was great that we could have some people chip in and share their experiences.
And definitely look out for those feedback evaluations. We would really appreciate your honest feedback about this. Russell, is there a schedule for the next session that we can announce anything?
For arena curling, no, we're not sure what we're doing next. Kevin was working on trying to put together a video based to help transition from doing usually his arena ice making clinics he does in an arena. But at the moment, he got curling for a couple of weeks, and now they're shut down, and he doesn't
We're
have
shut down. I can't film in there.
arena
So.
to actually put together a video. So we have talked about possibly having a topic forum on equipment, and that might be something that we'll do in January, but we'll sort that out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll let people know.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. And thanks again to Dan for letting us use your Zoom tonight. We appreciate that.
Anytime.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.